In this lesson, we will learn about the concept of constructor chaining. Let's look at the following example here. So we have defined a class A and then we have defined a class B which extends A. So here parent class is A and child class is B. Let's look at the class B. So in the class B, we have a field Y and then we have a non-parameterized constructor. Let's look at what will happen when we run this code. So we're saying B1 is equal to new B. So we have declared a variable B1 which is of type B. And when we call new B, it means this constructor here will be called. Now, when this constructor is called, notice we know that B extends A. So what will happen here is, in the first line of this code, in the first line of the constructor, of B, its parent constructor is also called. So what is the parent of B? Parent of B is A. So what is called? The constructor of A. So this will get called here. So in the first line, which is here, before even y is equal to 10, this constructor of A will be called. So what will happen here? So x will get the value 15. X will get the value 15 here. Then it's saying system.out.println new A plus x. So what will get printed is new A colon 15. Now after this constructor is over, we will come here and now y will get the value 10. And then system.out.println new B colon 10, which is the value of y. So let's understand this again. So whenever we are constructing an object of the child class, in the first line, whenever the constructor is getting called, the constructor of the parent class will get called. So the first line, the first thing that will happen, which means the first line, the constructor of the parent will get called. Okay. So which is why in this case, we call the constructor of B. Now once we came here, the first thing that will happen is that the constructor of its parent, which is A, will get called. And which constructor gets called? The non-parameterized constructor. And which constructor of the parent is called? The non-parameterized constructors. So the constructor with 0 parameters is the constructor that is called. So hence, once we call B, here at the first line, the constructor of its parent, and which constructor? The non-parameterized constructor or 0 parameter constructor was called. Hence this was called. Because this was called, x became 15 and new A colon 15 was printed. After that was over, this code got executed, which is why then y became 10 and new B colon 10 was printed. Okay. Let's look at one more example here. So the difference between the two, let's look at it. Here we had a constructor defined for A. In this, it's the same code, but here there is no constructor defined for A. So now when we construct an object of type B, what will happen? So we're saying B1 is an object of type B. And then when we're calling its constructor here, what will happen? So when we call the constructor of B, the constructor of its parent, which is A, will also get called. Now, is there a constructor of A here? No, there is no constructor of A. But we know if there is no constructor defined in the case of a class, then there will be a default constructor. A default constructor is put. So, in this case, the default constructor of A is called. So the default constructor of A is called, what will the default constructor do? It will initialize x to 0. So x gets initialized to 0. It will come here. Then y becomes 10. And then what will get printed on the screen is new b colon 10. So that is what will happen here. So in this case, again, the constructor of the parent is getting called. So constructor of the parent will get called every time. In this case, because in this class there was no constructor, so hence there was a default constructor and the default constructor got called. Okay. Let's look at one more example here. So the difference between the previous code and this is that here the constructors in both these classes have parameterized. So we have only parameterized constructors here. So let's say if we run a code like this. So b1 is equal to new b25. So we are constructing and we're declaring a variable b1 which is an object of type b. And once it gets called, what will happen? Here the constructor of the parent will get called. Now which constructor of the parent gets called here by the non-parameterized constructor? Is there a non-parameterized constructor in A? No, there is one constructor which takes one parameter. And because a constructor has been defined, there will be no default. So here we will not be able to get a 0 parameter or a non-parameterized constructor of A. So hence here there will be a compile error that there was no 0 parameter non-parameterized constructor in A. And where will that error be? The error will be in the definition of this constructor, because here is when it expects or it is looking for a non-parameterized constructor in A. So here we will get a compile time error. So in class A there is no compile time error, but in class B there is a compile time error. So compile time error in class B. Compile error in class B, because it could not find the non-parameterized constructor in A and it was expecting it. So how do we correct this? Suppose the definition of this class was only this and we wanted to extend it. So how would we do it? So there is another rule. So either the constructor of the parent will be called as a default. So in the previous examples we did not call it explicitly, or we can call it using super. So super is a special keyword which we can use to call the constructor of the parent, and it has to be the first line, because that is the first thing that has to happen. So it has to be the first line. So let's see here what will happen. So we have declared variable b1 which is an object of type b, and then we are calling its constructor new b20, which means this constructor gets called. Now in this new constructor, what are we saying? Super 15. So what does super 15 means? Super 15 means it is calling the constructor of the super class of B. What is the super class of B? A. The parent class of B, which is A, and it is calling it with the parameter 15. So is there a constructor of class A which takes an int as parameter? Yes. There is this constructor. So this constructor is getting called. Now what will happen here? X is equal to M. So X gets the value 15. And then what is it saying? System.out.println new A colon 15. So that will get printed. Now after super it will come here. Y is equal to N. So Y gets the value 20. And then it says system.out.println new B colon Y. So new B colon 20 is printed here. So notice there are two ways to do it. So in the previous examples, we were not calling the constructor. So by default, the first line, the constructor was getting called. If we want to call the constructor, we use the keyword super, and then whatever parameters we want to pass to it, we can do it. So we could have a non-parameterized call to it, which is super comma. So it could have been like, if you want to call it without a parameter, it is like this. If you want to call it with a parameter, like in this case, we have called it. We could even do it with any number of parameters you want. So, but they have to always be the first line. It always has to be the first line. Okay. So is this clear? Let's look at one more example. So here we have a class XYZ, and then we have a class ABC which extends XYZ. So a parent class is XYZ and child class of XYZ is ABC. Let's see what will happen in this code. So we are saying ABC A1 is equal to new ABC. So we are declaring a variable A1 which is an object of ABC, and then we are calling its constructor. So which constructor are we calling? We are calling this constructor. When we call this constructor, we know ABC extends XYZ. So the non-parameterized constructor of the parent will get called. So what is the non-parameterized constructor of this? It will be this, which will get called. So what will get printed first is new XYZ. So this gets printed on the screen, and then what will happen is it will come here, and what will get printed on the screen is new ABC. Okay. Let's look at the next line. We are saying ABC A2 is equal to new ABC Edufect. So we are declaring a variable A2 which is an object of ABC, and let's see what happens when we call its constructor. So which constructor are we calling? We are calling it this constructor because we are passing one parameter of type string. Now here again, when we are constructing the object, what will be the first thing that will happen? The constructor of the parent will get called. Which constructor? The non-parameterized. So what will get called here is the non-parameterized constructor of the parent. So what will get printed here is again new XYZ, and after that this will get executed. So what will get printed is hello Edufect. So the output here would be this. So is this clear? So any time for a child class, whenever we are creating an object, whenever we are calling a constructor, in the first line the constructor of the parent is called. And if you are not calling it explicitly using super, then which constructor? The non-parameterized constructor is called. Let's look at one more example. So here, if you notice the difference between the previous example and this example is that here we have a parameterized constructor in the parent class. So the parent class XYZ has a parameterized constructor. It does not have a non-parameterized constructor. So now let's look at again what will happen here. We are saying ABC A1 is equal to new ABC. So A1 is an object of ABC, and when we call it, what will happen? It will come here. Now in the first line, what will happen? It will call the constructor of the parent. Which constructor? The non-parameterized constructor. Now is there a non-parameterized constructor in XYZ? No, there is a parameterized constructor. And because there is a parameterized constructor, there will be no default constructor added. So here we will again get a compile error. And what will be the compile error? The compile error would be could not find non-parameterized constructor of XYZ. And where will this error happen? This error is not in class XYZ. This error is happening here when we are trying to construct an object of ABC. And this error will again happen here when we are trying to construct an object of ABC with one parameter. Because in both the cases, it will expect a non-parameterized constructor. Okay. So how do we correct it? So like we did earlier, what we will do, we will call the constructor of the parent using the keyword super. So we have called the constructor of the parent using the keyword super. So let's see what will happen here. So we have declared A1 as an object of type ABC, and when we call this constructor here, in the first line we are saying super 25. So super means calling the constructor of the parent, which is XYZ. So hence this constructor gets called, and what will do, it will do system.out.println number is equal to A. So what will get printed is number is equal to 25, and then it will come here and then it will print new ABC. Let's look at what will happen when we call execute this line. So A2 is an object of type ABC, and let's call its constructor with the parameter Edufect. So in the first line we have this called super. So because we have this called super, this constructor with one parameter will get called of the parent of ABC, which is XYZ. So this will get called with the parameter 36, and what will be printed is number is equal to 36. And after that it will come here and it will say hello Edufect. Okay, is this clear? So in both these constructors we called super with that parameter. Okay,